What's up, everyone? Welcome. We are live right now on CannaBuzz, and if you're joining us on YouTube, Spotify, or the Podcastosphere, thank you so much for joining us. We have a great episode for you today. We have Miles from Fermented Plant Extracts. So if you want to learn about fermented plant extracts and fermented plant juice and all that good microbe nutrient goodness, stay tuned because we're going to be diving right into that in a great episode for you. But before we get too far into the show, I need to give some folks some shout outs. First off, shout out to everyone in the CannaBuzz community. It's your way of supporting us, keeping the podcast going, supporting JR, and going to shows like the Dude Grows Cup in just a week or so. So if you want to be a part of that, join us over at cannabuzz.app in your browser or download the iOS app and use that code BUZZ for your first month free. You can join us in the live streams and be a part of the show when we record these episodes. You can also take part in our giveaways where we pick people from our community and we send them packs of seeds. We'd love to see you over there in cannabuzz.app, and we appreciate your support. Also, shout out to lostcoastplanttherapy.com. If you're looking for an organic IPM spray that you can use inside or outside, check out lostcoastplanttherapy.com or find them at your local grocery store or on Amazon. It's one of our favorite products that you can use in conjunction with other things in your IPM. And so we really appreciate it if you check out Lost Coast and give them our support. And then last shout out from me is to our friend Tanazi over at Sacred 3 Mushrooms. We just did an episode with Tanazi a couple weeks back. I know he's going to be at the Dude Grows Cup coming up soon. And if you want to grow your own mushrooms at home, go to sacred3mushrooms.com, or I believe it's tanazigardens.com. Is that right? And Tanazi's website there, he's got everything you can need. He's got grow kits, spores, everything you could want, and directions, all that kind of stuff. So go to sacred3mushrooms.com and use that code CannaBuzz for a discount. And then I'm going to throw it over to JR.
Thanks, Q. Appreciate it. This one's going to be, I'll try to make this one fast. We got Tiki announcements. He's got 30% off on all his seeds, and you get a free pack of Raspberry Rain, which is a Tiki Rain cross. Then Brad from Regenerative, his announcements are a candy floss, which is hard candy by his Lushies, which is a very sweet, gooey kind of vibe. So that's rawgenetics.io. But this week I also want to mention I'm_good_foot and Canna_capable. They have a Discord channel for folks with disabilities, and they try to help that community get access to seeds and grow knowledge and become self-sufficient in their medicine. And they have some packs available. They've got some Bubba Kush that they've crossed with the Cherry Paloma. That's called the Goodfoot, and I'm actually growing the Goodfoot right now. I'm excited. I got it outdoors. And so there's a couple other, Bubba Punch and some Cold Turkey. So check those guys out. You can find them on IG or on Discord at the Canna Capable channel.
Awesome.
Server.
Well, today we are joined by we have Miles here is what I'm trying to say. We've got Miles from Fermented Plant Extracts. We're really excited, Miles. We were just mentioning to you before the show. Last time we had you on the channel, I can't remember how long ago that was, like over a year ago. But since then, JR and I have been using your products since then, and so we feel at least a little bit more ready to have more in-depth conversation. So today we're going to be talking about fermented plant juices, extracts, and to kind of dive in to get the show kind of started for us, let's talk about what is fermented plant extracts and how is it different from fermented plant juices.
For sure. The biggest thing I can say for the difference between FPE and FPJ is water. Fermented plant extracts are water based, and fermented plant juice and fermented fruit juice, the Korean natural farming preparations, are syrups. They're like sugar based. So that's like the biggest difference. As I said, FPJ and FFJ are Korean natural farming preparations, and in that system, you don't use those fermented plant juice and fermented fruit juice on their own. You always mix them with other Korean natural farming preparations in what's called the solutions, the Korean natural farming solutions. My product, the fermented plant extracts, because it's water based and not part of the KNF system, it can be used solo on its own or in conjunction with other products. But it's a great like standalone, and because it's water based, it's great for just using in foliar sprays and root feedings whenever you're irrigating and feeding.
And they're both being inoculated with labs, basically, or something of that nature.
So fermented plant extracts, my product, I do use a lactic acid bacteria inoculant. I use EM1, I use whey, and I make my own Korean natural farming style labs. When you make FFJ and FPJ in Korean natural farming, you do not add any labs. In that process, you're using like the ubiquitous microbes that are naturally occurring on the plant matter or on the fruits as your inoculant. So
is that why it takes so much longer with the fish amino acid and the fermented plant juice? Like, because I just did the fish hydrolysate or hydrolysate, however you say it. And I got to say, it's much faster. I'm now preparing my fish amino acids for next year's nutrients, but that's going to it takes like a good 6 to 10 months before it's really, truly awesome, correct?
Yeah, and I think the reason that the FAA, the fish amino acids, take so long is because you're breaking down proteins and bones and animal. And in that prep, in FAA, we actually, for Korean natural farming, we actually add a separate inoculant of IMO 3 or 4 or 5, but an indigenous microorganism is added as an inoculant to FAA generally. And those microbes are what's effectively like responsible for that breakdown, that long-term breakdown of the fish proteins and the bones in FAA. Whereas in my product, FPE, lactic acid bacteria, is responsible for that breakdown and that conversion of nutrition into a water-soluble form. Now, in FPJ and FFJ, the Korean natural farming fruit and plant ferments, microbes are present, but there's not really like a microbial fermentation happening there. What's actually happening in those products is a sugar-induced osmosis, where liquid water is flowing from a place of high concentration to a place of low concentration. So you use wet plant matter or wet fruit, not wet in that it's wet on the outside, but wet in that it has moisture inside of it. And when you break it up, that moisture kind of comes out, and you mix that broken up moisture laden plant matter or fruit with dry sugar. And that's your high moisture and low moisture concentrations. And you get a syrup, you get a moisture laden plant matter or fruit, or a sugar laden plant matter and fruit, and a syrup. And that syrup is the FPJ or FFJ. So that's a very different process of like osmotic transference of moisture from plant matter or fruit into this syrup versus FAA, where like the fish is actually being decomposed and broken down by the microbes, and that takes a long time. Or like in my products, whereas in the liquid solution, there's microbes, sugars, and plant matter, and that it takes time for those microbes to consume the sugar, consume the plant matter. And, so in terms of time, the FFJ, FPJ, and the Korean natural farming syrups are the quickest. And then the FPE, my product, is kind of in the middle. It could be ready in anywhere from like 2 weeks to, maybe a month, depending on your brew and temperatures. And then the longest one would be the FAA, the fish amino acids.
Okay. So, to help kind of introduce people to the concept if they're not familiar with this product or what you guys do. Let's just kind of give folks an example. So right before the show, I was mentioning that I bought the Comfrey. I think that's the one with the blue label, right? So if and just to give folks an idea, it comes in, a jug. I bought like a nice sized jug of it. And I'm adding that into my like water jug or something like that. Or you were just saying I should foliar spray it. So what is that comfrey extract that I bought from you? What is that doing for me? Is it giving it nutrients? Am I like replacing some other nutrients that I would have been using otherwise, like a synthetic or whatever? And now I'm using this instead. Could you just kind of explain to folks what they're getting from it?
Sure. So the short answer is that the fermented plant extracts provide nutrition for the plant directly, and it provides nutrition for the microbes in your soil. And it's also providing an inoculation of new microbes into your soil. So it's an inoculant. It's technically got nutritive qualities for both the plant and the soil life. And this kind of longer, more obtuse scientific answer of that would be that the lactic acid bacteria secondary metabolites, their waste materials, and their second, their kind of outputs are more diverse and more complex because of the brew and the nutrient dense plant matter and the sugars and the timing. And because those microbes are kind of rich and these secondary metabolites are rich, those can provide nutrition for the plants and for the microbes in the soil. It's that secondary metabolites of the microbes that are doing the work primarily.
But and so for our guys out there that are growing in cocoa and stuff like that, where maybe they don't have the root exudate exchanges, they're pretty much pushing, could they still benefit from a foliar application? And if go ahead.
Definitely. I mean, and a root feeding. I mean, the only time I tell people not to do root feeding is if you're in a recirculating system where you're not drained to waste. If you're in cocoa and you're drained to waste, you can even feed it to your roots, no problem. But yeah, for people who are kind of like iffy about what they're putting through their roots, you will see a benefit from foliar spraying the fermented plant extracts 100%. It's especially where I live, where it's real arid. My plants love a foliar spray. To just add that little humidity and moisture to the canopy zone. Big love for that practice, and it's a lot of people forget about it. And the one thing about my product, which I'm addressing this year with some subtle changes, is the smell is really it's really smelly. So foliar spraying it can be kind of like offensive in that way. I'm gonna be adding some really subtle little things to the brews to reduce the smell here coming up soon. I'll be making some announcements about that.
Nice.
Yeah, man. But yeah, it's definitely good for synthetic. It's definitely providing nutrition. It's
And this is more we had a question about compost tea. So this is like, nutrients and a compost tea type thing together. It's more than a compost tea is what I'm trying to say.
Yes, it's different from a compost tea in that the microbes are very specific, lactic acid bacteria.
Right.
And the nutritive qualities of them are generally higher. Like generally a compost tea isn't about nutrition. It's just about microbiology and getting those microbes to a good high level in that brew and then putting that high level of microbes into the soil. And that microbial consortia in compost tea is broad. It's like all the microbes that were present in that tea are able, or in that compost, are able to expand and brew and grow in population and strength in that tea, and then you feed it. Whereas lactic acid bacteria is a big family, but it's one type of microbe that has one purpose, and that's what we're using in the ferments. So they're very different kinds of inoculants, the compost tea and the FPE for sure.
So the FPE with its lactic is more breaking down organic material, where some of the other microbes might, especially in a fungal situation, be doing nutrient exchanges in love for the exudate, correct?
Yes, exactly. And the way I like to describe this is that we have as Elaine Ingham, the great soil scientist, puts it, we have a soil food web where everything is kind of connected between, like, let's say, two ends of the spectrum. One would be our plant roots and our plants getting nutrition. And the other end of that spectrum, that food web, is like organic matter being decayed and breaking down and putting organic matter turning into nutrition in the soil. And everything in between those two is microbial exchanges and life exchanging with life. Whereas, like it might be a piece of leaf or a piece of forest duff or some wood chips or something on the surface of the soil being decomposed by different insects and bugs and lactic acid bacteria and all kinds of different decomposers are going to break that organic matter down till it's kind of something that looks like dirt. And then that dirt, soily material, let's call it like worm castings or insect frass or a fermentation evaporate, a microbial digestion thing. That material is going to also go under other microbial processes until it's directly injected into the root zone by a fungus, usually a what do they call them?
Hyphae?
Endomycorrhizal. The
Endo.
endomycorrhizal actually penetrate the root, and they grow partially inside of and partially outside of. Like they penetrate the roots, and because they're inside the roots, they can just have an exchange of nutrition. And to get a little mystical on it, I love to say, like, whenever there's an exchange of nutrition, that's an exchange of energy, right? And anytime when you're information, so that's just inherent that energy and information are kind of tied together. So these plants, like we're and these bugs and insects and microbes and everything in the soil, they're not just feeding each other. They're not just like eating each other's crap and like crapping out something else for somebody else to eat. There's like a informed exchange between them. So like a plant can tell a microbe what it needs. And
through
the
intelligence
can exchange. Yes, there's an intelligence and a communication there going along with all this nutritive exchange that that honestly we are not even privy to yet, even with modern science. We're just now starting to understand that there's a communication, that energy is information, that this is the soil biology realm. It's a really exciting time to be alive, to study it and learn about it, because it is like pre-scientific in a lot of ways, of where we understand what's going on but don't understand how, kind of.
Right.
Yeah, shout out to Nerdy by Nature on IG. He demonstrated where there were two second growth trees, but there was a stump of a tree that had its body cut off. But because they were able to communicate and feed that tree, it completely barked over the stump and is still a living organism without any leaves or any photosynthesis. It draws the nutrients from the community that it exists in.
Love that. Yeah, this is nature looks out for itself. You very rarely go into the forest and see a patch of sick-looking trees, or sometimes there's an invasive species that makes kind of some pathogenic situation. But generally, nature is like there's a succession where everything has its time. Everything has its time and place where it's going to have a spot in the sun to grow and do its thing and make its seeds, and then something else comes along in its time. And so there's a general upfulness, there's a general supportiveness within that natural systems, and that's what we're emulating with. We call it biomimicry with these natural farming systems. We're trying to emulate what happens in nature and what keeps everything going out in the wilderness, on its own.
Before we move into this next section where we're going to talk about how to make our own fermented plant extracts, I was just going to mention that folks can go to your website at fermentedplantextracts.com. You've got a full feeding schedule there, which is really cool. You've got and folks can buy your stuff at Build a Soil, which I'm a long time Build a Soil fan and love their stuff. So he's got a whole section there. He's got comfrey, he's got hemp extract, pumpkin extract, peach extract, watermelon extract. He's got KNF Proline, which is fish amino acids, which we were just talking about a little bit ago. All kinds of stuff. So if you're digging what we're talking about today, make sure to give Miles some support and check out Fermented Plant Extracts, or go over to Build a Soil, grab yourself a jug. I've been using the Comfrey and I like it. What have you been using, JR?
I used the pumpkin and I used the comfrey. And because of Miles and his educational part, which is something that, we're really not even talking about here, is the amount of education that he puts out into the community. I have actually launched into my own journey of making fermented plant extracts and fermented plant juices. So I'm really excited to kind of level up in that respect. And I thank Miles a lot, because I met him in a hot, sunny field at the Do Grow show. And he said, "Brother, let me hook it up for you." And so when I got home, I started playing around with the stuff, and I just kind of started following, because I've always been fascinated by microbial interactions and nutrient exchanges. I've always felt that was the key to unlocking the chronic, And so I'm going to go on a side note real quick with that kind of tangent. If I have a stress response from insects, say, can I do a fermentation of insect bodies and make a secondary response that's going to induce the plant into producing more terpenes and resin?
Maybe I like, so what you're touching on is kind of this Korean natural farming concept of IPMO, where they make an IMO using the bodies of bugs, and then judging like whatever microbes are going to colonize the bodies of the dead bugs are going to also maybe affect the life cycle of the living bugs. So using lactic acid bacteria to do this in my process, fermented plant extracts, it's you might, because of the chitosan present. There's chitosan in
That's where I'm getting at.
hard body. Right. So I would say that, like, and so what you're talking about is called systemic acquired response, and it's a plant response to stress, where the plant basically goes into extra beefy mode because it's feeling some kind of threat from a pathogen, insect or otherwise. And what we're wanting to do here is trigger those systemic acquired responses to stress. And in some cases, even if you don't have stress, even if you don't have any bugs at all, you can trigger this acquired response in a plant to stress. And even though there's no stress, and that's kind of the magic, that's really the point of this. So in my product line, what I've done to mimic the triggering of these systemic acquired responses is the willow and sage ferments. And willow has salicylic acid, and and sage has jasmonic acid. And those, if you look up systemic acquired response, there's two pathways that by which it can happen, and one is jasmonic and one is salicylic. And the chitosan, I believe, in insect bodies triggers the salicylic, I think, response.
Yep.
So there is a correlation there. It's not as direct as some people would think, where it's like, oh, I'm gonna use the dead bugs to kill the living bugs, which may be the case in IPMO. But for what we're talking about, I think it's more likely to have a benefit in that chitosan SAR response realm.
That's kind of what I'm thinking, because those secondary metabolites and those productions of resin and terpenes are enhanced by the presence of that and the chemistry of that. And so I was wondering, I'm already starting to see bigger brands have a product now that claim that it's made of this and that it does exactly what we just talked about. And so I'm wondering, from a open source type of vibe, how can we teach our own community how to maybe go buy half a 5-gallon bucket full of crickets and get to town, you know what I mean, and start making something that could potentially induce the same response. But what you're saying is you've taken that pathway, but you've cut out that part of it by using the sage and the other thing I
Right.
forgot.
Well, I mean that you can control population of your pests, and you can prepare your plants like as a preventative. And I think that those are two different things for in IPM, in integrated pest management. I think that reducing the population is where you're using IPMO, and maybe compost teas that have Bacillus thuringiensis is a good like anti-pest, anti-grasshopper, anything that has a two-stage life cycle. The BT, Bacillus thuringiensis, is a good. And a lot of people consider compost tea to be a good Bacillus thuringiensis inoculant. So if you're looking to like reduce population early in the season, like now, spraying compost tea around your plants and on your plants and stuff would be a good way to reduce the population and reduce the pressure on your plants from those insects. And then you can kind of go to the other end of the spectrum and trigger your plants' responses and get them in that preventative state of just like ready for whatever, and just ready to fight off a pathogen.
Right.
So that's where my head's at on that one. The two kind of IPM angles.
Well, I'm gonna kind of call an audible on JR's setup. And
You're on mute, Q.
Oh, sorry. I was on mute on the Zoom side of things. Well, I was gonna jump in. Actually, I was gonna kind of switch around the order of questions, just because based on the conversation we were having, and let's just take a real quick detour and talk about Foliar application of fermented plant extracts. You were saying before the show started, I mentioned I've used comfrey extract as a soil drench. So, like I was saying earlier, excuse me, I mix it in a watering can. But you were saying I should foliar spray it. Can you talk about the benefits of foliar spraying fermented plant extracts? And yeah, we'll just start there, and we'll kind of get into a few more questions.
For sure. Well, yeah. To preface that, I would like to like just remind and go back to what I said earlier about the KNF preps being made from plant matter and fruit that have ubiquitous naturally occurring microbes on them. So lactobacillus is one of these naturally occurring microbes. It occurs everywhere in the world, inside of animals' stomachs, out in the plants, in a desert, in a jungle, in the ocean. There's a lactobacillus strain for almost every environment on Earth, inside of animals and out, or inside of plants and out. So, that being said, applying lactobacillus to the outside of the plant it's only natural. It's again acting as this biomimicry of inoculating our plants. What's known as the phylosphere. It's the rhizosphere is the root zone, the phylosphere is the canopy. So inoculating the phylosphere with lactic acid bacteria has benefits particularly because lactic acid bacteria is anti-pathogenic. All strains of lactic acid bacteria are naturally anti-pathogenic. They're going to fight off anything that's going to be a threat, or they're going to outcompete anything that's going to be a threat. The nutrition and the biostimulant aspect through enzymes and other secondary metabolites of the lactic acid bacteria have immense benefits to the plant when applied foliar spray. So there's a lot of benefits there, both nutritive and inoculant biological.
And so like in KNF or Jadon practices, you're doing a fermented plant juice with like your labs, but this is already built into the product that you have. You don't have to have an additional lab source because you've already got that built in, correct?
Yes. And the difference there is that like there's what you're getting extractive wise from your plant matter. Like let's say you have apples, fruit. If you make an apple FFJ in KNF, you're getting that apple syrup. And then after that, you would make an apple vinegar. So you could have an apple syrup and apple vinegar. And then you could make an apple FPE using my recipe with lactic acid bacteria. Not mine, but the recipe I use.
Sure.
And then you could have an apple FPE. So each one of these, acetic acid in the vinegar, whatever ubiquitous microbes are present in the syrups, and then specifically lactic acid bacteria in the FPE. Each one of these biologically active extractions are going to get different nutritive, different enzymatic, different qualities out of that apple. Just like in a recipe, when you prepare an ingredient, you're going to get different flavors out of it depending how you prepare it and how it's treated in the
Right.
recipe. So, you're going to obviously have like a bitter in the acid. You're going to have a really sweet in the um, syrup, and it's going to be like a real funky sour in the lactic acid one. A real like kind of earthy, musky, and sour. And
Would you say that people who are in a living soil get more efficacy out of your product than, say, someone who is not?
I feel like it's beneficial in equal parts, just in different ways. Because like living soil guys are kind of like they can be a little bit harder sell sometimes because they know like the power of living soil, and they're kind of a little bit more DIYers. And like a hydro guy or a salt guy, cocoa or rockwool guy, like the benefits are kind of more like eye opening to be like, yo, like quality up, like saw it on the lab test, la. Like I hear it from the customers, from the feedback. And living soil people are like, yes, super bad. Because here's the difference is that the living soil guys like y'all, and I would imagine some of the listeners here, if they're this far into this one,
Yeah.
they
Word.
have a thirst for knowledge, and we're empowered by the knowledge to act. Like what we're doing is not because we necessarily believe like the bottle or the nutrition or the like or the advertising or the marketing. We understand the science, and therefore we're empowered to do it because we're like, oh, I know what's happening here. Like I'm putting down a top dressing, and then I'm watering in the ferments on top, and the lactic acid in the ferments is going to help break down the organic matter in the top dressings of the amendments quicker, like, or making your own compost and apply. Like the knowledge built in gives them a little bit more power to do it than a lot of the salt guys who are just kind of like, I heard this product makes it better, and then they try it and like, ooh, it smelled funky, but it made it better, so I'm happy. And like, you see, so I think that the benefits are like equal, but people come to the realization of that through different avenues, and depending on the way that they grow.
Yeah.
And not to say that people who grow salt don't have a thirst for knowledge on all this stuff. I just, in our community, the people I'm familiar with, like y'all and your listeners, we see the passion, and we're always like in that thirst for knowledge state together, and it's that's what makes it exciting.
That's why those are the people that listen to these sorts of shows.
Yeah,
essentially, like you said,
right now.
essentially, like you said, after minute 30, if we got you.
Yeah, totally. So on the topic of foliar spraying, are folks can you kind of give some tips on how folks can use these products throughout the growth cycle? So I assume foliar spraying and vegetative growth, and then maybe a little bit into flower. But I'd love to hear your pro tips on how people can incorporate this into their grow practices.
Great question. Thank you so much. So the best answer I can give on this is anybody who's grown ganja before knows, like, you in when you flip into flowering, or if you're outdoors when you start to bloom, we experience this stretch. The plants start to really kind of shoot and throw, and then you start to see the pre-flowers and the flowers begin. And I call them the little Guy Fieri's. They're like these little white, like they just look like all straight pointing up white. And depending on the strain, sometimes they're thicker, sometimes they're thinner, but they're all white and they're pointing straight up. And that's when you're like, oh, dang, the show is about to begin. Like, I for real, I'm growing herb, I'm growing ganja here. Like, here she's showing herself. So, like when you see those Guy Fieri's, you want to stop foliar spraying. Like maybe you give your last one. Like if you had one scheduled and you start to see them forming, you could give maybe one more, but then back. Like don't spray anymore And that's as a rule generally. And honestly, like in the flower days back when everybody was just growing for ganja to roll up and smoke or put in a bowl, you know, with trimming up, you might could have got away with a little bit more. But nowadays with people making rosin and doing the extracts and like we're much more concerned with the residues and everything on the bud. Um, Also, in licensed and commercial settings, the application of biologicals to the plant matter is just not. It's. I mean, maybe it is the move nowadays with rad source. Everybody running rad source. Maybe it's just like, yeah, inoculate the foliar, the like spray the. You're gonna rad source the weed anyhow, and not like nuclear bomb all the microbes anyhow. So I don't know. I don't know. That's like a topic for somebody who's got a red badge out here in Colorado.
Yeah.
But
It's like a red meat for Scotty on Dude Grows, who just have Scotty go off on radiating weed. Um, um, anyways, that's so when you're foliar spraying it, am I like at a lower dosage? Is it a higher dilution rate than I would if I were root drenching?
on the bottle, the application rates are identical for
Oh,
foliar
okay.
spray and root. But I will say always to titrate up. So start low and work your way up. It says 1 to 4 ounces per gallon on the bottle. Don't just think like I'm gonna gas them and like let's go and just go straight to 4 ounces. Like spray 1 ounce first, and then maybe 2 or 3, and then like 4. You know, like work your way up to 4. And I would suggest that with the roots and the foliar applications, like build up to it. I also always say like it's about application rate. So if you're timing to either spray or root feed like twice a week, maybe you use less dose. But if you're only going to feed once a week, you could use a high, like to plan into your schedule. Once you've titrated up and you can give a maximum application, you can say, I'm feeding twice this week. I'll only use 2 ounces a gallon, or I'm only feeding it once a week. I want to get it in there. I'm going to put in 4 ounces a gallon. And this depends on how quick your evaporative action in your soil is. And, on a lot of things,
Yeah.
just feeding schedules. But yeah, I think a lot of people are kind of just using 2 ounces a gallon. That's what I hear back from a lot of people, and they're just happy. They're really happy with 2 ounces a gallon. So yeah, that's kind of where my head's at on that. Is just giving people the idea of don't go hard off the bat. Titrate
Yeah,
up.
for sure.
Yep.
So, when we're putting together our foliar applications, what are things that go well together that we can mix together, and what are things we should avoid mixing in our foliar recipe?
Huh.
Like, can I use surfactants and
Yeah, with the ferments. Yeah, totally.
yeah,
You can use Q, build this little Q. You can use I just released a surfactant product. It's a herbal Jadam wedding agent, HJWA.
Oh, cool.
Using rosemary. Actually, shout out little Alex in California who did the production work on this. Great guy, great grower. But it's a basically a Castile soap, a plant infused Castile soap, where the rosemary is kind of cooked into it, fried into the oil. So it doesn't have like a rosemary oil smell. It has like a planty smell, like a cooked planty smell. But it doesn't really have a strong smell either. It's kind of like an unflavored soap with a little bit of planty musk in it. But it has
that's
some
wild.
benefits of rosemary as instructed by Young Sang Cho through Jadam. But that's the foliar applications really benefit from a surfactant actually, just to get that even coat on the leaves. And yeah, as far as what you can or can't mix with it, I think to get the best efficacy of each biological you're spraying, if you're applying other biology, people are like, "Can I add it to my compost tea?" And I'm like, "You can, but like I kind of like to tell people to use inoculants separately. Like
Yeah.
give each consortia a chance in the soil to like thrive and to establish before like because there's always a fluctuation, like I was saying, a succession of one thing's time. So there's always like a rise and fall of different microbes and plants and things in different environments. So yeah, I like to say if you're going to use another biological, use it separate from ferments to get the benefits out of both of them, not just the best benefits of the ferments. Because honestly, lactic acid bacteria is extremely vigorous and is likely to out compete and overpower a lot of like more subtle um or what I don't know how to say volatile or fragile players in that ecosystem of
Totally.
microbes.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking. You're kind of starting a war there, and one's gonna win,
Yeah,
or
I like
whatever.
to think of it as just like that flow because it's not a
Yeah,
battle. It's just like they flow and like just let give everything its time to happen.
totally.
Because like in
Last,
a day to a plant's like a year. Almost if in a season, like so a day is like a long time. We think, oh, I'll water the other inoculant in tomorrow. It's like that's a long time for the soil. Let it happen.
yeah, yeah.
One question, sorry, Q, before you go on to the next one. One question I want to mention before I forget is when I'm creating my own fermented plant extracts, I've noticed that all your products are very singular in their source. Can I mix blackberry shoots and comfrey together and make a extract out of that? Or should I stick to the individual plants themselves when I'm making my extracts and juices?
That's a great question, Jared. Thank you for asking that because this gives me an opportunity to give up credit and thanks for all the people who came before me. And this is my little tip of the hat to like all to the ancient traditional lineages that these natural farming practices come from. And in a lot of the way I was taught it was that you brew them separately and then you mix them and combine them for your application. So like if you want to have a vegetative, you make a vegetative one, and then a bloom one, you have a bloom one. And you can blend them like you're using the comfrey and the pumpkin. You can in transition in but the last weeks of flowering and the first weeks of bloom, you can kind of mix the two and get like a good blend of both. As I point out on the feeding chart on the website. Now I don't like that's just my tip of the hat to that mentality as I was taught it by Gil Carandang of the Unconventional Farmer. The I think nowadays as you're doing it, I think it's fine to mix them up and do if you're brewing them yourself. I don't think there's any necessarily drawback to those things. I think some things, some plant matters are more active to break down quicker than others. So if you had multiple different plant matters in a brew, you might want to consider like that the microbes might need time to get through each one and to get the most out of each one. Like a leafy green like spinach or something is going to break down a lot quicker than like a shoot of a blackberry stalk or something like you were
Yeah,
talking about that has a lignin like the cellulose versus lignin type of thing. So anything that's kind of remotely woody or stalky or crunchy versus something that's just soft and pliable is going to go real quick. So those kind of things play into it in keeping them separate. But I think for your purposes and what you're asking, there's nothing wrong with mixing them. One thing I would again point out is like think nutrient to the period of growth. It's called nutrioperiodism. So it's like what ferment are you going to use at what time of year? Like if you have a lawn that's full of all these different plants and you're just making a lawn clipping, all these different grasses, and you're feeding that back to your lawn, that makes perfect sense. But if you're doing blackberries and you're going to feed the blackberry brambles to your ganja, think like a fresh, ripe blackberry is most beneficial to a ganja plant at its ripening and finishing stage. And an unripe blackberry is something you could feed like in a earlier stage of growth.
Yeah, so what I did is I cut down this blackberry patch and then I laid about a 12-inch layer of wood chips right over the top of it. And then all of a sudden all these little blackberry shoots started coming up and they were about 6 inches tall. And they're just full of, auxins and hormones and growth stimulators. So I went and snapped, I went down as far as it would snap. If it was woody at all, I didn't grab it. And then I just kind of shoved it. I cut it up as fine as I could, and then I shoved it in a jar with equal amounts of brown sugar. And I'm hoping to get something delicious.
Yeah, that's going to be really interesting. The stalks of that. Yeah, man. So that's an FPJ, or a fermented plant juice of Korean natural farming, with the equal parts brown sugar. You're hoping to get the moisture inside those little shoots to carry the enzymes and the um and biostimulants, all the plant beneficials are going to be kind of osmotically flowed out of that with the water as it goes in the osmotic flow into the sugar, into the dry sugar.
And at that point, I'm going to have that syrup you mentioned, but can't I then take that syrup and make my FPE?
I mean, you could, like, because like that's kind of like a stage 2 or a V2, or like a little impression upon it, because technically all you need for FPE is any sugar source, which in this case, if you're substituting just a molasses, is what I like to use. If you're substituting molasses for the FPJ syrup, you're getting a little bit, like, you're getting a little like a extra with it at this point, like, because it's like, I say go for it. I always tell people, like, do the standard, like, version once or twice first, and then go extra on it, like learn a song before you start improvising and freestyling on it, right? So,
Word. I
like,
like that.
I always tell people it's okay to do that. Do those innovative, different things. Try new things out for sure. But know what you're trying out first, so that you know, like, because if you do something and it comes out wrong, you know that in your improvisation, if it sounds right or feels right, if it's wrong or not, you know. So this is kind of like tuning ourselves to the basics before we get crazy with it. But I love where your head is at. Also, to point out real quick, the next thing you can do with the sugar laden plant matter is you'll take that, scoop out, when you separate your syrup and your sugar laden plant matter, you can mix that. Say you have 1 cup of that, you can mix it with 10 cups of water, and then maybe a half a cup or a quarter cup of living vinegar. So you could use any kind of apple cider vinegar, Bragg's, that has the mother in it, and add a little bit of that. And that's adding your acetic acid inoculant, and let that sit for 30 to 60 days, I think, or 2 weeks minimum. And that will get like that bitter vinegary taste, smell, or flavor and smell and everything, and have the plant matter uh, extracted nutrition and enzymes in it as well. And in that way, you could make 3 preps out of the one thing you're talking about. That's really cool.
That's wild. That's wild. I like that.
Yeah, man.
So we're kind of coming up on the last several minutes of the show, so we won't be able to dive too deep into what we're going to talk about. We're going to talk about making ferments, but I went to your website, fermentedplantextracts.com/media, where you have a bunch of videos that you've been in, including on our show before, but you have episodes that you did with Build a Soil, where you made ferments for the farm, and it says how to make a ferment. But I guess, real quick questions that we could ask you while we still have you. Let's put myself in a situation where I've got something extra growing in my yard. Like in my case, I've got an orange tree. I also have a fig tree in the backyard. So there's times a year where I've got like more figs than I know what to do with. What could I, if I'm if I'm in a situation like that, what could I make? Am I doing exactly what, like we were just talking about earlier, where I'm taking a bunch of my extra figs or whatever it is, and I'm doing equal parts sugar, or what could I make with it? And what do I need, I guess?
The equal parts sugar one is a lot of fun, because it can be food grade as well. And it's always nice to kind of have something you can eat and something you can feed to your plants. And if you do the food grade equal parts sugar one, you can also go from there, as I just described, into vinegar. So you can make a sweet and a bitter with the right care and a few ingredients that, outside of the normal thing, like a living vinegar. That's pretty easy to do, and it creates a really fun thing. And then when you need it for the garden, mixing that sugar and that vinegar together that's a great combo. Like I said, you don't use them on their own. Typically, a lot of like syrupy, simple sugars aren't good for plant roots or directly applied. It's not. It's more for the microbes, and those microbes are the acetic acid, are some of those microbes. To make my product is a little bit more in depth. You need lactic acid bacteria, which can be found in the product EM1. It could also be found in my product, so you could use some of my product as a starter of your lactic acid. So you'd add water, lactic acid bacteria, inoculant, and plant matter. So whatever plant matter you have present or waste or extra, and some sugar. Like I said, I use molasses. That needs to brew for a couple weeks, several days, depending on your temperature and environmental conditions and the strength of the inoculant. And then that over time it'll undergo a significant change. You won't smell any sugariness of it. The plant matter will change. You'll get floaty signs of bacterial growth in the solution. It even has like a little effervescent quality when it's stirred up sometimes. But yeah, the fermentation action is very apparent when it is successful. And yeah, the way I teach to track that is by pH. You can tell the pH drops.
And so he could technically look at the kind of chemical structure and compounds of the fig, and then process the actual fruit however he has to do to make the fermented plant extract. And he's going to, in essence, be pulling out that chemistry in that fig and making it in an available form.
Conceptually, that's what's going on. I wouldn't say necessarily like directly like the chemistry. Like I can't for sure every time say, oh, if figs are high in whatever
Potassium or
phosphorus,
whatever. Yeah.
like that you're gonna have a high potassium, because it's like these things aren't really about nutritive like dominance of NPK or of certain
Okay.
like I always say to people, like if you're using, like people ask me to, if I'm, can this replace a fertilizer regime in like a conventional system? And I'm like, no, it can augment one, but it's not like the nutrition present isn't the nutrition present in the system isn't dominantly in my product. In living soil systems, that nutrition is present in the soil, in the amendments and organic matter in the soil, and my product is there to unlock that and open it up and provide it in that living soil food web we were talking about at the beginning of the show.
Right.
In a conventional setting, it's provided by whatever fertilizer regime is being fed, and this is going to augment plant responses that would otherwise be dormant, such as rhizophagy, all the other plant growth things that don't happen because there's not a biological interaction with the plants in conventional farming systems.
I think that's a very important thing to mention to listeners, so that their toolbox is tools that they know how to use. I think some new people wanting to jump into that, mindset and that style might say, "Oh, I'll just toss my base," and because they don't have enough built into the soil, it's not going to carry them to the finish line in the way that they would want. So I think it's really important that you mention that to folks. And I will say that that added stimulation that you're talking about coming from ferments or compost tea or any organic inputs for these guys that have been kind of on a salty kind of run, it's gonna boost the flavor and the terpene analysis of their end product for them. And that's why I see a lot of these guys, and you mentioned it at the beginning, they're figuring out ways to get these microbial interactions into their systems, and they're riding that synganic kind of train.
Yeah, and I like to call that more and more so. I'm calling this indoor regenerative because it's like synganic is a cool word, but like really, but regenerative is a big wave right now, and it's like honestly, what regenerative is a transition from conventional towards organic. It doesn't necessarily go all the way to organic for everybody, but it's an integration of natural practices into conventional systems. kind of creating a spectrum of natural farming that includes conventional practices. And I mean, that's what Synganic is. And so yeah, and I mean, like, especially in ganja, this is nothing new. I mean, I've been growing a long time, since like '04. And like the way I was taught was to take like Sunshine number 4 and put earthworm castings in it at like 30% earthworm castings to Sunshine 4, and then feed like Pure Blend Pro Botanicare, which is conventional, which at that time was a fairly natural, but still a conventional
Alternative.
fertilizer.
Yeah. I'm
Yeah,
with
but
you
I mean,
on that, because some of that
yeah,
stuff was just ferments in itself.
right. But even then, like in warehouse settings in Colorado around like 2010 when I first got out here, what was big was like neutral media like cocoa or Promix number 4, peat and perlite, and a conventional nutrient system like Canna or House and Garden or GH or whatever, and teas and inoculants such as like subculture, like you know, the powders, the I can't remember all the products, so like Orca and that kind of stuff,
Yeah.
the conventional farming inoculants, which were just Bacillus and Trichoderma for the most part, Glomus, Bacillus, and Trichoderma. But yeah, so this Synganic thing has always been around, and it's kind of like the emergence of living soil created this oh, two different systems, like oh, they're like
It,
opposing, and if you're not living soil, then you're salt, and if you're salt, then you're this and that, and it's like
it became a
like
duality. It became a duality, and there's a spectrum in between. You know what I mean?
it's everybody's choose your own adventure. What do you want to do with this thing? Like, how do you want to experience this thing? Like, and yeah, there's everything in between the two like extremes or purest levels of it, and different people are called to like experience that in different ways, and the knowledge of knowing that different things are available to you and how those different systems work, and the ecological and responsible ethical like implications of both of those systems at when carried out to scale. That's like really important for people to understand. That's the kind of stuff I get into in like my classes. My stuff is like, why are we doing what we're doing? Like,
Right.
what's the purpose of this? It's not just about dank weed. It's not just about like nutrient dense food. It's about the soil and how we provide for ourselves as people for like coming generations.
Well, where can people learn more about your classes? Where can people follow you and just learn more about you? Plug all the things that you want.
Yeah, man, good thanks. The websites, fermentedplantextracts.com, weedshouldtastegood.com. The Instagram accounts, Fermented Plant Extracts and Weed Should Taste Good. Buildasoil.com always. I have classes available on my website, online classes. Actually, JR, I was wanting to talk to you about the thing, the disabled education for people who want to provide their own medicine. I got a class we should talk about later. I got a class about how to make your own medicine out of your plant. Like once you grow the ganja, how do you make the Pico tincture? I got a
Nice.
class like that. I'd love to donate for that cause. That'd be dope.
That would be
But
fantastic. I would love to get you in touch with that. That'd help a lot of folks out.
yeah, and it's as easy as me sending them a link and they got the class for free now. So yeah, let's do that. But that's all through my website, Fermented Plant Extracts, all those classes. Um the Instagram, the websites, the classes, all the email and everything is available on the web through the websites. And Build a Soil, that's the biggest shout out I can give. Oh yeah, I want to shout out the seed carriers who carry my seeds, Daga Love, Daga.garden, I think, Peter over at Future Cannabis Project,
Oh, nice.
Seeds Here Now, James Bean. Give thanks to those folks carrying my seeds, and Deep Green Genetics will. So yeah, these are the places to get my genetics, my ganja genetics, Build a Soil to get most of the ferments, my website to get the ferments and the education. Weed Should Taste Good to get some classes, but mostly a cool T-shirt and a hoodie and hat for your people. And that's pretty much. Oh, and IG for like the jokes and the memes and the positive like camaraderie and fellowship that we get through the socials and all that. So
Awesome.
I'm good for a laugh every now and then, if nothing else, on social.
Well, Miles, we really appreciate your time today, and just the knowledge that you always share with the community. You've been doing this for years, across all sorts of different YouTube channels and podcasts and stuff like that. And so it's really awesome of you to spend your time today on a Sunday afternoon sharing the knowledge with our listeners. So we really do appreciate it, Miles.
Man, anytime. I appreciate y'all doing all the effort. I don't understand or see that all the work that y'all are doing behind the scenes to make this happen for everybody who's experiencing this. So give thanks right back. This is a great experience, and I'm down to do it anytime.
Thanks, man.
We love you for that, brother. Thank you.
Anytime.
Well, if you guys enjoyed this episode, make sure to give us a like or leave a comment. We'd love to hear from you. You can leave a comment on YouTube or on Spotify these days. You can comment on episodes on Spotify. So if that's your thing, join us over there. We'd love to hear from you. Also, make sure to support the supporters of this show. We've had their links and stuff like that in the show descriptions. They've had their logos here at the bottom of the screen you see on the show. And support them. Also, join us over in the CannaBuzz community. Shout out to everyone in the CannaBuzz community. We had Devil's Leaf, 44, 420 grams, Dab Father, Mr. Grow and Smoke, all the Red Nose Pitbull, all those guys were hanging out in the show today. So we appreciate their support as well. But I've got to go. We've been having a great time and appreciate your time, Miles. Appreciate your time, JR. Shout out to JR. Everyone in the that's still listening, leave some comments for JR. He's had a bit of one. So if you see him at the Dude Grows Cup, give him a hug.
I need it.
Yeah. But thanks for hanging out, guys. And as always, JR.
Growers love.
Peace, everyone. Have a great rest of your day.